Good morning and welcome to today's 20-minute update, BCF's monthly series of interactive calls and Facebook Live streams to give you an inside look at BCF, our initiatives, and the things we're doing around the city, county, and the entire region. Thank you for joining us. I'm Billy Malcolm with BCF, and today with me is Tami Smith. Tami is associate professor at Goucher College, and she's a researcher working with the Baltimore Education Research Consortium, otherwise known as BERC. Good morning, Tami.
Thank you.
Before we get started, we definitely have to thank our civic leadership fund donors for their support. It's because of them that BCF can offer these resources, so we're very grateful. And today we're talking about school effectiveness. I am excited about this conversation, and if you're excited about this conversation, don't forget to like us on Facebook, as well as share hashtag 20-minute update, and that is pound 20-minute update. All right, good morning, Tami, again, and we are here to talk about school effectiveness. Just to get started, I guess we've been partnering about a year now with BERC on this work, and BCF thought this work, defining what is effective in a schoolhouse is so important. And I think because so many people have opinions about what is right and wrong with schools and are they effective or not. And so with our work with you, we were hoping that from a genius researcher lens, you all would be able to really nail down what are the elements of an effective school. Does it have to be data, student outcomes? And it tends to be where everyone goes. I spend a lot of time with people challenging me. Nothing's right in specifically city schools. But we know that all across this city, it's not just neighborhood specific. Inside there are pockets. It could be a classroom. It could be an after school program where great things are happening. And so I know that once we turned this assignment over to you all, you started shaping it and you kind of came out with this theme of quality seat. So whether it's school effectiveness or the term is quality seat, no banter here on that. Would just love to hear a little more about where we are with that project. What have you learned? So
right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And thank you for the opportunity to participate in this research. I think our entire research team has had a nice time working with it. So traditionally, school effectiveness is sort of defined by measures or academic outcomes by students. And as you mentioned, we're really talking about shifting the paradigm a little bit and thinking about what are the things that adults do in schools that contribute to a quality context for individual kids. And we know that might be different for different kids as well. So we're calling it quality seat to focus on the individual and on the growth or improvement of that context.
now this is really important what you just said. Not looking at student data at all.
So we are looking at student data, but we're shifting the model a little bit. So instead we're looking at first, what are the specific things that adults do that might contribute? What are the things that they have control over in the context? Then we look at student outcomes. So student outcomes are still really important, but we don't want to define the quality of the seat based on the performance of the student alone. We want to know what are the things that adults are doing to help that child reach their potential.
I probably should have said this before, but I think that's exactly why BCF would care about funding this type of research, because at the end of the day, what should we be funding? I think this research will answer that question, and why? What are the conditions? So I think this is really exciting. Tell us a little more about, in depth, these elements that affect a seat.
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay.
So we've developed a model right now that has 5 what we call drivers, or they might also be considered factors that contribute to a quality seat. And the first one is really instruction. Okay, so what are the things that a teacher does to create the environment in the classroom? What things do they do with instructional time? And is there academic rigor in the class? Those sorts of things. Then we also have a category which we call teacher. And that is more addressing what are the experiences, skills, and dispositions that a teacher brings to the classroom that might help their students. The third one is safety. So do students feel safe, both physically and mentally in the classroom? Are they free of distractions from learning? Then we talk about leaders in the same way that we did teachers. So what are the experiences, the skills and dispositions of the leaders in the school? And then our fifth category is really talking about external engagement, and that is comprised of two parts. One is, what ways does the administrative and other staff in the school engage with parents? Do they communicate with them? Do they include them in the learning process? And then also, what ways do they harness sort of community resources or develop partnerships within the community that might help individual students? And so again, bringing all those pieces together to make a supportive community for the children before they get there.
This is awesome, especially because you're backing it up with research. I've been sitting on school effectiveness review teams with the school system, which is phenomenal. They're actually doing qualitative data. What is it? I think it's every 3 years a school gets a review, and it's too bad we can't do it more frequently.
Yeah.
But I think that aligns with their framework.
Yes. So we actually started our model with sort of some theoretical, what's been written in the research, that type of thing. And then it's been exciting because we've been working with a couple of the different offices in city schools.
At city schools. Oh, great.
Yes. And so they were helpful. We looked at the SER, the School Effectiveness Review, as part of shaping our model to understand what context it's being used in. So our model, if it was used in a different district, might look a little bit differently. How another school district defines quality might be different than the
that's
way
important.
BCF does.
That different districts, talk a little more about that. Different districts defining quality differently. Right now we're being pushed to Common Core standards and a national statement on what is ready when a child is ready to be successful in their post-school career, life, work, whatever.
Right.
Talk a little more about how that folds into.
Well, I think it mirrors what we are talking about with kids in schools. So we say in schools that there are these things that we generally know that are important for kids to learn and be able to do, okay? And even maybe some social skills in there. But we also understand that there are individual differences with those children. They come from different contexts, have different needs. So I think the same thing could be said about a district. So while we have these broad categories that could probably apply anywhere, it are the nuances or the values of the system in which they're working that you would need to adjust to.
Very good. Very good. Wow. And I think, again, timely for a lot of reasons. I know I guess it's not a new administration anymore. We're a year into, at city schools, Dr. Santelises being a part. And I'm hearing a lot about priorities. So how do you see this work kind of dovetailing in with her 3 priority areas were literacy, leadership, and whole child or student wholeness? Talk a little bit about how you think this work connects.
Well, I think it pairs really nicely because we're really talking about all aspects of a child. And also I think for us, when we talk about outcomes, we're not necessarily just talking about academic outcomes on standardized tests, but there are other outcomes that, we are working on co-defining with the city schools. Also, the leadership development will help in adults' abilities to serve the needs of children. So I think that matches quite nicely.
Yeah, that's important. Again, it's just I've been around the way and I've seen a lot, and it's really hard to hear, especially for the schools, their personnel, teachers, the folks who are working so hard. If I go back to No Child Left Behind, there was the adequate yearly progress, and if you didn't hit that target, you failed.
Yes.
And so this model, taking a look at what is working, and hopefully the system can reflect that in its evaluation tools or what have you, to make those folks be encouraged about the good work they're doing, if indeed they're doing good work. And if they're not, those that want to hone their craft, especially when you're talking about the teacher quality piece, have the opportunity to have PD that helps them. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I see it as a proactive approach, so rather than a sort of summative test at the end to say whether you did a good job or not. It's more of a looking at, here are the different things that we know that we're not so good at this, so we might want to work on that. So I think it's sort of guiding future direction for improvement.
Great. I think we're supposed to take calls here. Do we have calls? Not yet? Okay. No, none? Okay. All right. Not yet. So we can keep chatting about it. Talk more about, I know you're in communication and connection with the school system. What are the kind of things you look, because again, you said theoretical approach. If you're laying that inside of this school system, city schools in this case, what kind of data is out there that helps you to make your theoretical frame real or not?
So that's part
and
of
I don't know, I'm not technical. That's why I'm so excited you're here, because I can't explain the data and the research. I respect it. And so just giving us a little insight on what is behind that.
Right. And so in the end, when we're finished with the model, so this is the working model and we're coming together, and what are the metrics? So eventually we hope to be able to say, we think this impacts quality seats more, teacher versus instruction impacts it more or less. So I think that we'll eventually get there. But part of, I think you use the language of laying it down in city schools, and I think of it as us defining together what it is. And so part of that is influenced by what things already are being measured in the city. Mm-hmm. Hopefully those are aligned with some of their values, and then maybe might make some suggestions of some other things that they might consider measuring. So I don't know yet, because we
it's brand new. And so you're in partnership with, for instance, is it the Achievement and Accountability Office, or?
We've shared the information, had conversations with a number of individuals, several offices. We've talked with the Chief Academic Officer. We've talked with College and Career Readiness, with the Research Division, Planning, and also some stuff with Human resources.
Human capital. Yeah. No, that's okay. So that's pretty thorough. I mean, to go in, so you're kind of turning over stones in these conversations, trying to find out how do we tell this story. The kids are living it right now, right?
Yes.
So I think, too, just going back to your point about we're not talking about the student performance as this work for, I think that's what excites me the most again. So I really do get excited about this. I do education at BCF, but just to know that we're acknowledging adults, there are things you can't, so many times we say those kids, they don't want to learn, or some of them, it's the challenge of the home and no one's blaming the kids, but there's not a real conversation. Well, the conversation is beginning, especially as I've heard Dr. Santalisa say, everybody needs to lead from their space under this leadership priority. This framework gets me excited because we're starting to shape how you can lead from your space, because you've identified adults in instruction, which of course are teachers, the leaders in that school, as well as the community. And sometimes the community, I used to work at city schools, right? So in my time under the reform, there was this shifting of the paradigm that says partners are PR things. We do pictures but there's this real shift that says, no, you're really part of the solution. So to know that that's made it into this framework as a bona fide indicator of a quality seat is very exciting. Got a question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Can I say
Go ahead, please.
So one interesting thing about that is I think it builds efficacy for the adults also in the building. And so, for example, if a student has a particular, maybe traumatic something happening at home, then there's what community resource can be brought in, what skills can the teacher have, and so each of those drivers, how do we create a safe environment and so on.
That's great. This question's for you, right?
Oh, no.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. How does BERC plan to measure external engagement?
That's a great question. And we've talked about that a lot, and what does it mean, and what is what is a meaningful partnership, and we think there's something about longevity and the use of that. The difficulty is how that's documented. So that's really hard. I know that some things are documented publicly, if a school is receiving money from a particular organization, but I haven't experienced or don't know that there's a systematic way of doing that, and if there is, I'd love to hear.
Someone can tell us
what it is.
Well, and even inside of external, again, coming from city schools, the Office of Engagement, I always push to say external is distinctly partners and parents. Like there are folks that fit under the bucket of partners, and that could be community residents and paid partnerships, discounted nonprofits that come in, or free services. Partner goes broad, but not neglecting that parents have a distinct role. Yes, they are external. Some would argue they're internal, however you want to frame it, but they are not a part of the system and not paid, right? So you just have these two divisions. And so that thoroughly looking through, I would hate for us to lump external and not tease out what that means. And I know we've had parent surveys and things in the past, so this is going to be interesting. I mean, we've got 2 years left on our grant, right? And working together in this partnership, hopefully we figure it out, and hopefully someone's listening today that could be helpful in that, because that's the big, would you agree, is the biggest hurdle in terms of the 5 ingredients?
Yes, well, because it's right, the way it's documented and covered is different. And I agree with you. One of the things that they've said in city schools is for us to kind of consider separating those two. So
I think they're part of your external. I don't think you break out the framework to have 6. Right. It makes sense to call it external, but that we pay attention to both strands.
Yes, absolutely.
Another question for you. Let's see. No, not a question. Let's see, callers that want to ask questions that are on the phone, they need to press *6. Anyone who is on live with us and would like to ask a question live, please press *6. And how would I know? They'll talk. Okay. They can just jump in. Yeah. Okay. Oh, here's the question. Got it. All right. And here's the tough one. Is the funding crisis in city schools affecting this work?
That's an interesting question. Well, right now, most of our funding is coming through BCF, and so, but it could significantly impact what resource and capacity the school has, the district, has to continue working with us, I suppose.
Right. I think we're paying for this research, and love you as a partner, that's going to happen regardless. But I do think, if you look at cuts too severe in terms of these point people you need to touch base with, the folks who love and curate the data, like, you can't lose those people, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So their support is really important.
Right.
And for it to be meaningful.
Yeah, but I think overall, a general deficit does not affect how we move forward in the work.
Right, our work can keep moving forward.
Right. Any questions? If you have questions, go ahead and push *6 to jump in on this conversation. You are more than welcome. I'm excited to have Tami here talking with us about school effectiveness and quality seat. Talk a little bit about why the migration from the word school effectiveness. That's a word that BCF has used. And in your research, you really teased out, and you've really been protective over, let's talk quality seat. Talk about, and again, as your partner, I love it. I'm being led by you, and I love that you feel like there's a distinction to be made. Talk a little bit about that distinction.
Right. So I think that because school effectiveness has been used for things like accountability, and it's been around for a long time, that it has a particular meaning, and so. And I think that our work is a little bit different than that. We certainly use the results and findings of the years and years of school effectiveness studies that have been conducted, which have traditionally, as I said earlier, they look at sort of what are the outcomes of students, and if they're surprisingly better than we would expect, then researchers would go into schools and figure out what are some of the best practices and that sort of thing. And I think our shift is really to look at, we really value, I think my entire team, we value improvement and finding ways to help individuals figure out what's the next thing we can try. And it might not be the silver bullet, but it's one piece in a broader puzzle.
And that is where I get excited, again, because coming out of the school system, I said it earlier on this call, so much of it is we're not acknowledging the improvement. And if this framework and this body of work can kind of change the conversation to say, what you just said, here's some innovative ways from what the research is saying or how you can improve. I mean, that's where we need to go. It's enough of this. You should be here. And this last round of, like I said, Common Core, I respect, honestly, personally, that we're testing and there's a measure. Right. But to not acknowledge the hard work. And again, in city schools, there's a lot of hard work for improvement. And it may not even be captured, right? So it's causing people to make judgments or statements or when they don't know. And it's those folks inside of the schoolhouse that know what they're doing. So to be able to kind of capture that and pull it out and say, these are the kinds of things that are happening. Maybe we even need a campaign that spotlights the actual people that do it. I don't know. Yeah. Any questions? We are here. If you would like to offer your input, maybe it's not a question, you have a comment. We'd love to hear it. We've got 1 minute left. You can interrupt us. If not, Again, so tell us in this next year, we've said 3 years. Year 2 is what's the focus? You built the framework. Year 2 will be focusing on what?
Right. So we've done some preliminary testing with statistical methods and stuff, and the city schools have actually offered to give us some more data that they think would be relevant to measuring each of these drivers, and so that's sort of the next step, is fleshing out what things are available, aggregating that data together to see if they actually do. We actually control for demographic information about the students, and then look to see what the outcomes are, so that we want all students to be making progress, not just certain sets of students. So.
That's right. That's great. And then what does year 3 hold of this grant?
So I think we're actually year 1.5, so we're kind of in between that. Between that phase, I think that. Personally, I'm hopeful on the implementation and practical piece. If we are able to continue to move forward with city schools as we have been so far, that might play a role in their new portfolios, for example, that they're putting together. So thinking about effective schools in that, and it's really an iterative process, I think. So. Well,
this is exciting. BCF will be excited to showcase what you've done. I think this is timely, this work. Kudos to my predecessors who mapped this out, who said this is very important to do. And I just inherited a great body of work and a great partner. Thank you very much, Tami, for joining us today. This was our conversation on school effectiveness. We thank you for joining us.